I still remember the sting of those words. My own sister, Madison, laughing at me, dissecting my life, calling me pathetic right there in front of Manhattan's elite. It was a humiliation so deep it burned, but little did she know that night was about to flip her entire world upside down. It had been another brutal 14-hour shift at Mercy General. The familiar ache in my shoulders was a constant companion, but my day wasn't over. I had just under an hour to shed the antiseptic smell of the ICU and somehow transform into someone worthy of attending the Hartwell Foundation Gala. Not that I wanted to go. Madison had made it clear that skipping the family's annual appearance was social suicide. My cramped studio apartment in Queens felt even smaller after the hospital's sprawling corridors. I peeled off my scrubs, the fabric damp with sweat, catching my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun. 3 years of nursing school debt still haunted me, a financial shadow Madison never let me forget. If you just married well like I did, instead of chasing some noble calling, she'd often say with that practiced smile, you wouldn't be living paycheck to paycheck. The black dress hanging in my closet was the same one I'd worn to every formal event for 2 years. A clearance rack fine, but it fit well. With Grandma's pearl earrings, my only real valuable possession, I hoped it wouldn't scream budget buy. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Madison. Please tell me you're not wearing that same black dress again. The Hartwells will be there, and I refuse to be embarrassed by association. I typed back, I'll look appropriate. See you there. Her response was instant. Appropriate isn't the same as impressive. Try to mingle. You never know who might take pity on you. That last line cut deep as always. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom was a vision of old-world elegance. Crystal chandeliers, white orchids, a string quartet playing softly. The guest list read like a Forbes magazine roster. Tech moguls, real estate tycoons, pharmaceutical titans. People whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small countries. I spotted Madison instantly. She commanded attention in an emerald green Valentino gown, diamonds glittering at her throat and wrists. Trevor, her investment banker husband, stood beside her, his Harvard Business School smile firmly in place. From a distance, I saw Madison's expression shift from polite socialite charm to barely concealed disappointment as her eyes found me. She excused herself from her group and glided over, champagne flute in hand. Jessica, darling. Her voice dripped with false warmth as she air-kissed my cheeks. You made it, and you're wearing that dress again. It's a classic style, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, refusing to take the bait. Classic? Her laugh was musical, but sharp. That's one way to put it. Come, let me introduce you around, though I'm not sure what will say you do. This is my sister. She wipes up bodily fluids for a living. Doesn't exactly flow off the tongue. My jaw tightened. I'm a registered nurse in the cardiac intensive care unit. I save lives. How noble. Her tone suggested it was anything but, though I notice it hasn't saved your bank account. Before I could respond, she was already steering me toward a cluster of women discussing Hampton's vacation homes and private school college placement rates. Ladies, I'd like you to meet my sister, Jessica. She works in healthcare. Mrs. Peton, wife of a pharmaceutical CEO, smiled politely. How wonderful. Are you a doctor? I'm a nurse, I said, my voice steady. The temperature in the group seemed to drop. Mrs. Peton's smile became strained. How admirable. Such important work. I recognized the tone, the same one people use for charitable causes they'd never personally touch. I was being patted on the head, simultaneously praised and categorized as someone who couldn't achieve anything better. Jessica went to nursing school instead of college, Madison added helpfully, each word a small knife twist. She's always been more practically minded than academically inclined. The truth was more complicated, but I'd learned that correcting Madison only made things worse. I excused myself and made my way to the bar, needing a moment to breathe. The bartender, a young man who couldn't have been much older than me, smiled sympathetically as he poured my wine. Rough crowd, he asked quietly. You could say that. I've worked enough of these events to recognize the look, he said. You're not one of them, are you? I laughed ruefully. Is it that obvious? Let's just say you're the first person tonight who said please and thank you when ordering a drink. The observation stung. I watched the crowd, people who moved through the world assuming service, expecting deference. I'd grown up in this world before my parents' divorce had shifted our family dynamics, but I'd never quite fit the mold Madison had embraced so completely. By the way, if you're still with me, make sure to hit subscribe. More unbelievable stories are coming. My coworker Sarah's text buzzed. How's the fancy party? Rubbing elbows with millionaires. I typed back, more like being tolerated by them. She replied, hang in there. Remember, you belong anywhere you choose to be. Sarah's words were kind, but I wasn't sure I believed them anymore. I belonged in the hospital where my skills mattered. Here, I felt like an imposter. As the auction announcements began, I found myself trapped in another stilted conversation about charity tax benefits. Then, Madison's voice cut through like a blade. Jessica, come here. There's someone I want you to meet. I followed her to a distinguished older man, Harold Peton, CEO of Peton Pharmaceuticals. Harold, this is my sister, Jessica. She works at Mercy General. Harold's handshake was firm but brief. A healthcare professional. We always appreciate feedback from the front lines. Tell me, what do you think of our new cardiac medication protocols? I blinked, recognizing a rare opportunity to contribute something meaningful. Well, the recent trials for ACE inhibitor combinations have shown promising results, though we've noticed some patients experience more side effects than anticipated with the higher dosages. How fascinating, Harold interrupted, his tone suggesting anything but. Madison, didn't you mention your sister was in nursing? I was hoping to speak with a physician about clinical outcomes. The dismissal was swift and surgical. My cheeks burned. Madison's smile grew strained. Yes, Jessica is a nurse, she said quickly. She's very hands-on with patient care. Of course. Nurses do important work, Harold said, with the tone one might use to praise a child's finger painting. If you'll excuse me, I see Dr. Morrison across the room. As Harold walked away, Madison turned to me, barely concealed frustration on her face. Really, Jessica? You couldn't just smile and nod? You had to launch into medical jargon like you're qualified to. Discuss pharmaceutical research. I'm qualified, I said quietly. I work with these medications every day. You're a nurse, Madison hissed. You follow orders. You don't make research decisions or influence policy. Her words stung because they echoed doubts I sometimes had myself. In the hospital, I was respected. Here, my knowledge was dismissed as cute but irrelevant. Then, a kind voice interrupted my spiraling thoughts. Not tempting enough for you? I turned to find Catherine Walsh, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and understated elegance. Sounds lovely, I replied honestly. Just not on my budget right now. I appreciate honesty, Catherine said, with a genuine laugh. Family obligation. I appreciate that even more than honesty. What do you do when you're not fulfilling family obligations? I'm a nurse at Mercy General Cardiac ICU. That must be incredibly demanding work. For the first time all evening, I found myself in a conversation where my profession wasn't treated as a consolation prize. Catherine asked thoughtful questions, and I spoke about my work with a passion I hadn't realized I possessed. Our conversation was interrupted by Madison, her smile bright, her eyes calculating. Jessica, there you are. I see you've met Catherine. Yes, we were just discussing Jessica's work, Catherine said pleasantly. She's clearly passionate about patient care. Oh yes, Jessica has always been very dedicated to helping people, Madison said, her backhanded compliment factory working overtime. Though we keep telling her she could do so much more with her background. She has a bachelor's degree. You know, she could easily transition into healthcare administration or pharmaceutical sales, something with more growth potential. More growth potential than saving lives? Catherine asked, her tone remaining pleasant, but with an edge that made Madison's smile falter. Madison backtracked, tried to explain my financial struggles. It was the same old song and dance. Try to enjoy yourself, Madison concluded, and please don't monopolize people's time with work stories. Not everyone finds medical details as fascinating as you do. Your sister certainly has strong opinions about your career choices, Catherine observed. Madison means well, I said automatically. She just worries that I'm not living up to my potential. And what do you think your potential is? The question caught me off guard. No one ever asked what I thought. I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, I said quietly. I help people on the worst days of their lives. I hold hands with scared patients and explain procedures. I catch medication errors and advocate for pain management. That feels like potential fulfilled to me. Catherine smiled, a genuine, warm smile. It sounds like it to me, too. Just as the Gala's master of ceremonies began announcements, my phone rang. Mercy General's main number. This is Jessica. Jessica, it's Dr. Martinez. I know you're at an event, but we have a situation. Mr. Harrison, bed 7, his condition deteriorated rapidly. His family is asking for you specifically. They say you're the only one who's been able to calm him. In the ballroom behind me, I could hear Madison's laughter, probably regaling someone with another story about my quaint career choices. I thought about Mr. Harrison, a retired teacher, scared and confused. I'd held his hand, shown him pictures of his grandchildren. I'll be there in 40 minutes, I said. This is more important. As I slipped out of the plaza, I caught sight of myself in a hallway mirror. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman in an affordable dress, wearing her grandmother's pearls, about to leave a society gala to comfort a frightened patient. For the first time all evening, I felt proud of my reflection. The subway ride gave me time to decompress. I changed into fresh scrubs. When I stepped into the ICU, the familiar beeping and humming welcomed me home. Maria, the night nurse, sighed. Thank God you're here. Mr. Harrison's been asking for you every 10 minutes. I spent the next hour explaining his condition to him and his daughter, Linda. By the time I left his room, both were visibly calmer. You're the only one who treats him like a person instead of a condition, Linda said. Driving home at 2 a.m., I reflected on the contrast. At the gala, my knowledge was dismissed. Here, it brought comfort and understanding. My phone buzzed with texts. Madison, where did you disappear to? Sarah, heard you came in tonight after your fancy party. You know you don't have to save everyone, right? Though I'm glad you were here for the Harrisons. And then, an unknown number. Jessica, this is Catherine Walsh from tonight's event. Would you be interested in coffee this week? I'd like to continue our conversation about healthcare advocacy. I smiled at Sarah's message. She understood something Madison never would. Choosing to care for others wasn't a limitation. I replied to Catherine, I'd love to meet for coffee. How about Saturday morning? The following morning brought an unexpected phone call that would truly shift everything. Jonathan Mitchell, my father's attorney. Jessica, your grandmother's estate has been settled, and there are some assets that need to be claimed. My grandmother Rose? Her modest estate was supposed to be insolvent. Jonathan's next words made my heart race. Additional assets have come to light. Properties and investments, quite substantial actually. At his office, the documents spread across his mahogany table told a story I'd never known. My grandmother had been a secret investor, buying real estate and blue-chip stock for decades under her maiden name, living frugally to maximize her compound growth. The numbers made my hands shake. Millions. Why didn't anyone know about this? I whispered. Your grandmother was very private, Jonathan explained. She made it clear she wanted her wealth to remain secret until after her death. She'd seen how money changed family dynamics. He handed me a sealed envelope. Her letter. My dearest Jessica, it began. If you're reading this, my secret has finally been revealed. I've watched you choose a path of service over profit, compassion over convenience, and integrity over advantage. This inheritance isn't a reward for your choices. It's a tool to help you continue making them freely. Now you can heal others from a position of strength rather than struggle. The legal paperwork would take weeks, but it meant paying off my student loans, buying a home, living comfortably while continuing my nursing career. It also meant that Madison's poor dear sister narrative was now completely irrelevant. I decided to keep the inheritance quiet for now. Saturday morning arrived with an unexpected snowfall. I met Catherine at Meridian Cafe, an elegant place whirled away from my usual coffee spot. She greeted me with a genuine embrace. "What do you think drives that doubt?" Catherine asked, after I'd admitted my family thought I was limiting myself financially. External pressure or internal questioning? The question struck deeper than I expected. Probably both. My family sees nursing as a stepping stone, not a destination. "And what do you see it as?" she asked. "Home," I said without hesitation. "It's where I belong." Catherine nodded. "That's why I wanted to meet with you. Your perspective on healthcare, seeing it from the ground level, that's invaluable insight, often missing from policy discussions." She explained she served on the board of the Metropolitan Healthcare Initiative, and they wanted me to join their new advocacy program. Testifying before state legislators, participating in policy working groups. The compensation was substantial, but more importantly, it was an opportunity to truly make a difference. "Who told you that your experience isn't valuable enough?" Catherine asked gently, sensing my hesitation. I realized I'd internalized Madison's narrative so completely, I'd begun to believe it myself. "You're right," I said slowly. "I do have valuable perspective." My phone buzzed. "Madison, emergency family meeting tonight at Mother's. 7 p.m. Don't be late. Trevor's promotion announcement. Big changes are coming. Need to discuss family dynamics." Catherine just smiled. "Ah, the sister from Gala who seems to have strong opinions about your career." That evening, I walked into my mother's Upper West Side brownstone. Madison and Trevor were already there, arranged on the cream-colored sofa like a magazine advertisement for successful young couples. "Jessica, darling, you look tired," my mother said, accepting my air kiss. "Madison says you left the Hartwell Gala early." "A patient needed me," I replied simply. Madison's smile was performative. "Perfect timing. We have a most exciting news to share." Before they could launch into Trevor's promotion, my mother spoke. "I want to address what happened at the Hartwell Gala." Madison mentioned there were some social challenges. My stomach tightened. Madison launched into it, explaining how I shouldn't have used medical jargon with Harold Patton. When someone of his stature asks about your work, they're expecting a brief, modest response, not a detailed analysis of drug efficacy. Harold asked me specifically about cardiac medication protocols. I was responding to his question. I stated the clarity I felt surprising even myself. They try to guide me towards pharmaceutical sales or corporate wellness. Not just socially acceptable, Madison said, financially sustainable. "You're 31, Jessica. What happens when you're too old for ICU nursing?" The questions hung in the air, each one representing years of Madison's worry, but based on assumptions that were no longer accurate. "Madison," I said carefully, "what if money wasn't a factor in my career decisions?" Trevor laughed. "Money is always a factor, Jessica. But hypothetically," I persisted, "if I had financial security, would you still want me to change careers?" Madison's expression shifted. "Well, I suppose if you had unlimited resources, you could afford to stay in nursing. But that's not realistic for someone in your situation." "What situation is that?" I asked. I took a deep breath, remembering my grandmother's words about healing from a position of strength. "What if I told you I don't need financial security because I already have it?" The room fell silent. Madison's wine glass paused halfway to her lips. Trevor's confident smile faltered. My mother's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "What do you mean?" Madison asked carefully. "Grandmother Rose left me an inheritance," I said, my voice steady. "A substantial one." "That's impossible," Madison said immediately. "Grandmother Rose barely had enough money to pay for her funeral. The estate was insolvent." "That's what everyone believed," I agreed. "But she had been investing for decades under her maiden name. Real estate, stocks, bonds. The inheritance is enough to eliminate my student loans, buy a home, and live comfortably while continuing my nursing career." Trevor's business-trained mind kicked in first. "How substantial are we talking about?" "Substantial enough that your concerns about my financial future are no longer relevant," I replied. Madison set down her wine glass with a sharp click. "Why didn't you tell us about this inheritance earlier?" "Because I wanted time to process it without outside opinions about how I should use it." I looked at Madison's indignant expression. Her entire relationship with me was built on the assumption of my financial inferiority. Remove that foundation, and the dynamic shifted completely. I am financially secure. I choose to work in nursing because I love it, not because I'm trapped by circumstances. The inheritance doesn't change what I want to do with my life. It just removes the pressure to compromise my values for financial reasons. But you still live in that tiny apartment in Queens, Madison protested. You still work double shifts and drive that old Honda. Because I like my life, I said simply. The inheritance doesn't change who I am or what matters to me. It just means I can be who I am without apology. The family meeting that was supposed to celebrate Trevor's promotion had become something entirely different. I rose from my chair. Trevor, congratulations on your promotion. I hope we can celebrate that properly next time. As I moved toward the door, Madison found her voice. Jessica, wait. We need to talk about this more. There are implications, decisions to make, family considerations. There really aren't, I replied gently. Nothing has changed except your knowledge of my circumstances. I'm still the same person, making the same choices for the same reasons. The week that followed was a whirlwind. Madison's voicemails, my mother's handwritten notes, Trevor's attempts to discuss investment strategies. I ignored them all, focusing on finalizing the inheritance paperwork and preparing for my new role with the Metropolitan Healthcare Initiative. Catherine Walsh had even invited me to present at the annual Healthcare Innovation Gala. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, transforming the Great Hall into an elegant venue where medicine met policy. I wore a midnight blue dress I'd purchased for the occasion, not to impress, but because I finally felt worthy of dressing for my success. As I reviewed my notes, Catherine appeared beside me. You look absolutely stunning. Are you ready to change some minds tonight? I'm ready to share what I've learned. I replied. The speaker's lounge was filled with distinguished healthcare professionals. 6 months ago, I would have felt intimidated. Tonight, I belonged here. As I took my place on the stage, I saw them. Harold Petton, the pharmaceutical CEO, at a prominent table. Mrs. Blackwell, and there, near the center, Madison and Trevor. Madison wore emerald green again, her signature color, her expression a carefully composed mask of sisterly support. The Whitmore family contingent came to support you, Catherine murmured, following my gaze. Your sister called my office requesting tickets. I nodded. Madison's presence wasn't about support. It was about control. She needed to witness this moment. Our final speaker tonight brings a perspective that's often missing from healthcare policy discussions, Dr. Rebecca Chun, the moderator, announced. Jessica Whitmore is a cardiac intensive care nurse at Mercy General Hospital and our newest policy advocate with the Metropolitan Healthcare Initiative. She'll be speaking about the human impact of healthcare legislation. I approached the podium, feeling the weight of every patient's story I was about to share. 6 months ago, I began, my voice clear and confident. I attended a charity gala where a pharmaceutical executive asked my opinion about cardiac medication protocols. When I responded with clinical observations based on 3 years of intensive care experience, I was told that my perspective wasn't appropriate for the conversation. A murmur rippled through the audience. Several people turned to look at Harold Petton, whose face flushed red. Tonight, I want to explain why that dismissal represents everything wrong with how we approach healthcare policy in this country. Because the people implementing your policies at the bedside, nurses, respiratory therapists, patient care technicians, we're not just following orders. We're the ones who see when protocols don't work, when medications cause unexpected reactions, when hospital systems fail the people they're designed to serve. For the next 15 minutes, I presented case studies that illustrated the disconnect between policy and reality. I spoke about elderly patients unable to afford medications, about protocols that prioritized efficiency over dignity. Healthcare policy without frontline input is like urban planning without talking to the people who live in the neighborhoods. I concluded, if we want healthcare systems that actually serve patients, we need to value the insights of everyone involved in patient care, regardless of their degree level or job title. The applause was immediate and sustained. I saw several audience members rise to their feet. During the reception, I was surrounded by healthcare administrators, policy researchers, medical executives. Miss Whitmore, that was extraordinary, said Dr. Patricia Reynolds, Chief Medical Officer at Mount Sinai. Would you be willing to consult on protocol development? Other invitations poured in. The expertise that had been dismissed as shop talk at a charity event was now recognized as valuable professional insight. Then, Madison appeared at my elbow. Jessica, that was quite a presentation, she said, her smile bright, but her eyes calculating. I had no idea you were so articulate about policy matters. Thank you for coming, I replied politely, turning back to the researchers I was speaking with. Madison wasn't ready to be dismissed. I'm sorry to interrupt, but could I borrow my sister for just a moment? Family business. In the museum's sculpture garden, Madison spoke, her tone carefully modulated. That was quite a performance in there. It wasn't a performance, I countered. It was my professional expertise. Of course, she waved dismissively. Though, I have to say, it's interesting how much more confident you've become since your financial situation changed. I looked at her, beautiful, accomplished, and still fundamentally unable to accept that my transformation had nothing to do with money and everything to do with finally refusing to apologize for my choices. Madison, my confidence didn't come from an inheritance. It came from recognizing that I don't need anyone else's approval to value my own expertise. But surely you can see how tonight validates what we've been telling you, Madison pressed. You clearly have leadership potential, communication skills. You could transition into healthcare administration, maybe run a hospital system someday. Why limit yourself to bedside nursing when you could have real power? Her question revealed everything about the fundamental difference in our perspectives. She saw power as position. I saw it as impact. I have real power every day, I said quietly. When I help a frightened patient understand their diagnosis, when I catch a medication error that could have been fatal, when I hold someone's hand during the scariest moment of their life, that's not a limitation, Madison. That's the purpose. Madison's expression shifted. Confusion, frustration, and something that might have been envy. I don't understand you at all anymore. I know, I replied gently. And that's okay. We don't have to understand each other's choices to respect them. As we returned to the reception, a distinguished man with silver hair approached us. Miss Whitmore, I'm Anthony Richardson, CEO of Richardson Enterprises. I wanted to personally thank you for tonight's presentation. I shook his hand, noting the genuine warmth in his expression. More than useful, transformative, he said, his smile engaging. I've been looking for someone with your combination of clinical expertise and policy insight to lead our corporate wellness initiative. Would you be interested in discussing a partnership? As we talked, I became aware that our conversation was drawing attention. Anthony Richardson was clearly someone whose presence commanded respect, and his obvious interest in my work was being noted by everyone. I'd be very interested in exploring collaboration, I said. Healthcare policy needs more corporate engagement to be effective. Wonderful. Perhaps we could continue this conversation over dinner next week. The invitation was professional, but carried undertones. I found myself intrigued by both the opportunity and the man. I liked that very much. As Anthony handed me his business card, I caught sight of Madison's expression across the room. She was staring at us with undisguised shock, clearly recognizing Anthony Richardson's prominence, struggling to process this latest development in my rapidly evolving social position. The evening concluded with a flurry of new professional contacts and speaking opportunities. As I gathered my things to leave, Catherine approached. I think we can safely say this evening exceeded all expectations, she said, her smile satisfied. How does it feel to be the most sought-after healthcare policy advocate in New York? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. It feels like I'm finally where I belong. As I walked out of the Metropolitan Museum, my phone buzzed with a text from Anthony Richardson. Thank you for an inspiring evening. Looking forward to our dinner conversation. I smiled. Then I saw Madison approaching. Jessica, she called, hurrying over. Wait, we need to talk. Her carefully composed expression had cracked, revealing genuine confusion. About everything, she said helplessly. About who you are, what you want, what this all means. 6 months ago, you were my little sister who needed guidance and financial support. Tonight, you're being courted by Anthony Richardson and commanding a standing ovation from medical professionals. I don't understand how this happened. I looked at my sister, still beautiful, still accomplished, and still fundamentally unable to grasp that my transformation had been years in the making and had nothing to do with external validation. It happened because I stopped pretending to be smaller than I am. I said simply, "The inheritance didn't change me, Madison. It just removed the fear that kept me from being myself fully." As Trevor pulled up in their BMW, Madison paused at the car door. "Will you call me? Can we talk properly about all this?" "Of course," I replied. "But Madison, the next time we talk, it needs to be as equals, not as the successful sister and the struggling one, but as two women who've made different choices for different reasons." Madison nodded slowly, and for the first time, I saw genuine respect in her eyes rather than condescending concern. As I walked toward the subway, my phone buzzing with new connections, I realized that tonight marked not just a professional triumph, but the completion of a journey that had ended with something far more valuable than money: the unshakable knowledge of my own worth. The young woman who had been dismissed at a charity gala for sharing her medical expertise was now being courted by healthcare leaders across the country. But more importantly, she was finally free to be exactly who she had always been: a healer, an advocate, and a woman who measured success not by social position, but by the lives she touched and the system she helped improve. Have you ever had a moment where you realized your worth, completely independent of what others thought? Or a time you stood up for your true calling despite family pressure? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.